Hello.
There you go. Boom. Canadian wine lovers, Carl's Wine Club members, welcome for the third night in a row. So tonight we are talking Petit Verdot. Tonight we're talking vertical tasting, and we're talking with Mark Simpson, owner, winemaker at Siren's Call. So Mark,
Hello,
how's it going?
Cheers. Good.
Cheers, cheers. Thanks for taking some time out of your Sunday. Are you still in Whistler?
No, I got back today.
You got back today?
Yeah.
How's the slope?
Oh, it was awesome.
Yeah?
You know, I hurt my back last year in December 29th, so I didn't ski much. So it was a very big emotional release to get out in the snow and have a slide, let off some steam after a very long and stressful harvest. So, and be with my friends. I got a lot of friends and clients in Whistler, so it's kind of like my second home. So yeah, it was right on.
That's awesome. I saw your post yesterday, a couple of days ago, and just to see you back on the slope is pretty good. It's awesome to have you back doing what you love. So for our people who are just listening, we're just going to welcome everyone across the country. This is now what 7 o'clock Eastern time, so people are just finishing up dinner in their Eastern time zone. 4 o'clock here, late afternoon in BC. So Thursday, we talked Chardonnay with Westcott Vineyard. We tasted some single vineyard Chardonnays. There was on Friday, we tasted with yesterday. I mixed up my days. Like yesterday, we were with Rob and Michelle. We tasted the new syndicate, the 2019 vintage syndicate, and also the Syrah from Back Market. And tonight we're following up with Siren's Call, and something that we've done pretty amazing with Siren's Call and Mark in Carl's Cellar package. Mark came up with the great idea to do a vertical pack, 2 mini verticals, one of the 3 years Viognier and one of 3 years of Petit Verdot. So tonight we're gonna taste the 3 different years of Petit Verdot. And before we start out, Mark, I would like you to tell our people a little bit more about how did you get there? How did you get to Siren's Call today in 2021 with now probably having like 12 labels under your portfolio? You're running the BC Wine Studios as a wine consultant. You have different gigs all over the valley, and I would say more all over BC. So how did you get there as a winemaker?
Well, that's a lot of questions. I'll unravel it one by one. First of all, before we get into that, I just want to have a moment of empathy for people in BC because there's widespread flooding and people are in trouble, and we're in, wave after wave of these huge rainstorms. So it's not all sunshine and roses here in the coast. For those of you in Ontario and Quebec and the rest of Canada, you've probably heard what's going on, but it's still bad. The roads are closed right now, and people are, worried about their futures, their farms. So it's from a little bit of a somber perspective that, as someone who's involved in the farming community myself, I view this and I feel it deep inside me because it's my people that are affected. So, it's not all sunshine and roses on a Sunday afternoon, but we can still have some fun talking about wine. But I just want to bring visibility to what's happening in my home. So
I totally agree, Mark. I totally agree. It's a very good point to always put these things in perspective. That's for sure.
Yeah. So first thing I mentioned is I've had a fairly interesting transition in my work life, and one of them is that I've become much more focused on my own brand, Siren's Call, which we're going to talk about primarily tonight. And you mentioned whole bunch of things that I'm doing that maybe seems like I'm all over the map, but I have a very focused business ecosystem, and everything complements one another. And I'll tell you a story about that. Remember to ask me about Laurent, the vine guy, later on. So, and second part that's kind of interesting for me is I've been able to focus more on Siren's Call because I have Valerie and Steve who have taken over the license and the running of BC Wine Studio, and that's their gig. They're running that. I'm helping them, and that's given me the freedom of spirit to do really focus on what it is I like to do, is make my own wines and work with interesting people. So all the wines are made there, but that's been a pretty important transition for me and very positive. So all the things that I've done in my life have sprung from fantastic relationships people I've met and worked with over a long term. My type of consulting work is not a short trajectory. Typically, someone meets me and we work together 4 or 5, 6 years. I listened today on the drive home to the Facebook Live with Rob and Michelle from Black Market. And as those of you who listen know, Rob's business started with us in our winery, and we nurtured him up to a very good place. He's standing on his own feet, making great wines as his own winemaker. So that's the kind of stuff we do. It's not fly by night. It's stuff that's cooperative, collaborative. We work together. We help our growers be successful by having the fruit go to a good place. So when you brand wines about the fruit and the vineyards, you're really showing respect for the farmers. So that I call my business ecosystem is all about that. But I think most people want to hear about the wines, but that's the answer to your question. You're happy to delve into any of those themes, but there it is.
Thank you, Mark. And before you started Siren's Call, before you were a winemaker, you were in the beer business, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's true. And you know what? It's not a was, it's an is. I am still a brewmaster. I'm also a cider maker, and I'm about to start a distillery next few weeks. So I love all these interconnections of fermentation and the biology of it and the natural aspects of it, because it all weaves together in my head like one big biology experiment that just keeps me interested day after day. So when I get up for work, it's not really work. It's kind of fun. I mean, of course, we got to clean barrels and prune the vines and take out the garbage and clean, which mostly winemaking is. But all that intrigue of working with in these different arenas is really the same trajectory. It's the same continuum. I haven't really changed careers. I've just evolved. I've changed. I've grown up, trying new stuff. A lot of the work I do, with mixing yeasts and different barrels, and came straight out of Belgium and straight out of the pedigree of brewing where these places have influenced me. And, I just keep doing it, but it's in a winemaking forum. I was putting fruit in beer and putting beer in barrels in BC at Granville Island Brewery before most other people had even heard of that in this craft beer crazy province. So I did that whole thing and did it well, and I still love it. But right now it's all about the grapes.
It is indeed all about the grapes. The 2021 vintage was just wrapped up. You came back last week here in the Okanagan. You did you checked into in the cellar to make sure everything was under control. But how was 2021 vintage for you guys?
Oh, I've got to say, I mean, quality wise, pretty good. And I did a really nice post-harvest review with BC Wine Trends. So those of you who know that website, you can look there. And Julian Park, who's an excellent journalist, he's pulled together about 12 or 15 winemakers from all different regions, and they've done, collectively, all of us, a good review of how the harvest went in each part of the province. So I really encourage you guys here on Carl's Wine Club to go and read those posts because they're very informative. And you also learn about the terroir of each region by how they dealt with the challenges. So in our case, the home vineyard for BC Wine Studio is Hawks Vineyard in Okanagan Falls. And, we had smoke. We had a fire in McLean Creek. We had bear attacks on our vineyard coming to eat the grapes, which nobody wants. And throughout the valley, there was varying levels of smoke, heat dome, stress from COVID, political stress, supply chain stress. So someone in my shoes, I deal with all those aspects in the work. We have to buy bottles, we have to farm grapes, we have to deal with clients who want to come visit who aren't vaccinated, which, by the way, we won't even talk about. But all that stuff is the daily bread of a business owner. That's not just in the cellar; it's taking care of all that other stuff. So it was very stressful to manage all those pieces and try and keep them in line. But we tried to be quite proactive early on in the harvest. We had a lot of consultation with various winemakers. We had Pascal Madavan in the cellar. We had Christine Leroux. We had Benoit, our neighbor from Noble Ridge. Valerie was in there too, coordinating all these discussions. Rob Hammersley came over. We had support from our ingredient suppliers like Nuance and Cellar Tech, who were very helpful in helping us deal with the potential impacts of smoke taint, because our perspective as winemakers in BC is it's here to stay, and we got to learn how to function and excel, not just function, but excel in that environment. And navigating COVID, that's a whole other can of worms. That's challenging as well. So with all these global issues going on, a container from China cost $10,000 or $12,000, where 2 years ago it cost $4,000. So that translates to 50 cents a bottle. We're paying more for our glass like today, next week, next month, next spring. So, we got to sometimes blow off some steam, have some fun to deal with, those weightier issues. But every day you got to be focused, because if you aren't, something's going to bite you in the ass.
That is for sure. That is for sure. You mentioned something about terroir just earlier when you were talking about Julian Spark and his report, and terroir, working with different terroir from all over the valley. That is something that you do with your portfolio of Siren's Call, because you source some of the most wonderful grapes from all over the valley, and you work with amazing growers from all over the valley to build your portfolio. And so I would like to touch base a little bit about that, about your partner, the one who grows the grape. What is the importance of that part of the business for you before we get the grapes into the barrel? How important your partnership with the growers are?
Well, it's critically important because, as people will say, the grapes are, pardon me, the wines are made in the vineyard, and that's essentially true. I mean, if you have great fruit, you can make great wine. If you have shitty fruit, it's hard to make great wine. You can, but it's way more challenging, and you got to, work way more in the cellar with the wines than just dealing with what nature's given you. So I think my perspective on that is the growers are such critically important parts of our universe. We have to become very intimate with them, communicate what we need, work with them when they have a bad vintage. Don't just reject the grapes, but help them sustain their businesses by, working with people in the good years and the bad years, because we're going to have good and bad harvests all the time. That's just nature. And in many cases, these growers have become close personal friends, and I've helped them start their own wineries. A classic example, Mohan Gill. I started working with his fruit in 2010 when he was mainly growing apples and grapes, and now he has his own winery. You go into the Border Town Winery, there's a fleet of 10 and 20,000 liter tanks up and down 4 different rows. So he's grown into a very prominent. I can't really call him boutique. I don't know what to call him, but prominent land-based winery where it's a grower who grows kick-ass fruit and he makes good wine from the fruit. Another example, Suki Dhaliwal, who I've sourced fruit quite a bit over the years. He has the Kismet Winery, and he has his brother and son-in-law in there running it. It's a true family business. They have a fantastic Indian food bistro. Can't remember the name right now. Maybe someone will put that on chat and remind me. But these guys who grow and make wine from their own grapes, they're gold, because they truly understand the process. They not just trying to get the fruit off and disappear to Hawaii. They're actually invested in the process year round because they understand the impact. And how I've dealt with that is in some of my bottles, I put the grower's name on the back, and I want to show respect for the fruit. I want to show respect for the effort they've made to provide us with a beautiful raw material, and also help them create a brand for themselves. Like, wineries that use grapes from vineyards that have integrity are going to sell better than brand X, if you just don't even put the name on the bottle where it's from and you call it a blend, or you don't even name the terroir, if you show where your fruit's coming from, then all the people that are enjoying the farm to table movement, the 100-mile diet, that kind of crowd is going to really appreciate the integrity of the supply chain sourcing. And the other part is when those vineyard selections give special flavors, then people know that the Similkameen Valley will taste like this. It'll be flinty, it'll be minerally, you'll have sage, you'll get brilliant acidity from the Naramata bench, et cetera, et cetera. So the integrity of the fruit source speaks to the consumer in a way that we really need to grab onto, because that creates an identity for BC as a wine region.
And I think you're bang on. And I think that's, we are in a stage now, at a step in our evolution as a wine growing region, that now we're ready to take that step to differentiate the quality. Now the vines are old enough to differentiate the fruits from the East Bench of Osoyoos versus the fruits of the Naramata Bench. You mentioned the Similkameen, and you mentioned now we have like these beautiful vineyards in Caledon as well. So all of these regions now have their own typicity. And I think that we are ready now to be like, to showcase the sub-regional part of what we do. And it's very important.
Yes, indeed. I agree.
Yeah, absolutely. So now there's a couple parts, because there's the grapes, but there's also Mother Nature. And that's what we're going to talk a little bit more in depth right now, because we're going to talk about Petit Verdot, and we're going to talk about what Mother Nature gave the growers. And especially, I think your Petit Verdot, the source of your Petit Verdot comes from all the way down south in Osoyoos, with, I think, with Mohan, right, at border town, with your Petit Verdot. That's your source for all of these vintages?
Correct. Yeah.
Correct. So now, so what Mother Nature provided in 17, 18, and 19 in terms of Petit Verdot, because I have 3 wines in my glass right now, and they smell different, they look different, they don't have the same like one. The 19 is really opaque, the 18 is more on the red, the 17 has a little bit more of a little smoky aroma. So we have, so I know what I mentioned, smoky. Right now, we need to be very careful about smoke. It's not smoke ashtray or smoke fire. I talk a little bit more about the grilled food, the smokiness that I got on the 17. But yeah, so 3 different vintages, 1 source of grape, and one winemaker. Tell us a little bit about the process. How are we going to taste these 3 wines? Because the idea is absolutely fantastic to taste that side by side. And I can't wait to dig into that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, each vintage is different. We have different pick date, different levels of heat units. And I also might vary the mix of the winemaking as well. For example, the barrel program that we lay down really has to respect the vintage. And there's, a lot of times where I'll start, on a wine program and have an idea what the oak's going to look like, but I rarely select the oak until the wine's pressed. Now that's sometimes backwards, because you have to, plan to buy your barrels and plan what you're going to use and how many barrels and what the yield is and all that stuff. But I truly believe that the personality of the wine shows up and speaks to you, when you're near the end of fermentation, or, just before, just after pressing. And then you can actually plug in the right wood that's going to accentuate the characteristics of the ferment and the fruit itself. So you mentioned in 2017 a bit of smoke. Well, I felt that year, because of the success I've had with Syrah, that the barrel program there, which features a very, very special barrel from Seguin, Moreau, Napa cooperage, and it's a very old French cooperage house that's operating in California. They have a barrel manufacturing there, or cooperage as they call it. And the barrels I get there are the Ustave, which the barrel it's serrated on the interior, so it's like not smooth. It's got grooves, which is done by a machine, and those grooves give a higher surface area and a different integration trajectory for those barrels. And those barrels have a medium plus toast on the body and a heavy toast on the head. So all that smoke and bacon and char that could be parallel to flavors from smoke taint from a forest fire, or similar to, actually are, creating a beautiful treatment to the wine because of the robust tannins and the rich flavors, and it can stand up to some oak. Plus, the acidity is higher. I think in that 17 vintage we had a pretty high acidity in the vineyard, but also a high brick. So you get the high alcohol that carries the weight of all those elements weaving together. So I think the three themes in Petit Verdot are thick skins, which give a robust tannin structure, higher bricks, typically 27, 28, never lower than 26 from that vineyard. That gives you, 15.5% alcohol. And then the robust acidity structure of the grapes allows us to, balance with a more robust oak program. So in this 17, there's a mixture of American oak and French oak. We have the elegance and spice of the French oak, and we've got the robust meatiness of that special barrel from Saguenay-Moreau.
And often, and like 90% of the case of winemakers, they use Petit Verdot as a blending element with the Cabernet and the Merlot and the Caprin. It's the integral part of the Bordeaux blend or the Meritage, with hand in hand with Malbec. This always brings some great element to a beautiful assemblage of different grapes. But when you go solo on its own, does it change the strategy how you treat the Petit Verdot, or you keep treating the Petit Verdot the same way than when you go, let's say, with your harmonious blend?
Well, I think it really depends on what the year gives us. But the general strategy, I think, is to vinify each grape. And I'm referring to Harmonious now, my blended wine. There's 6 grapes in it. Is to vinify each grape on its own unique trajectory. So, yeast selection, fermentation technique, and the later barrel program really have to reflect the flavor profile of that grape. And I always try and find an oak program that will lift up the varietal character, not cover it up. For example, there's a barrel type I've used in the past called Châteauroux, which is a region in France. It's a very, particular spice to the wood, very tight grain oak. That lifts up the spice and pepper in Malbec. So in the same way that with the, robust brooding texture of the Petit Verdot, some American oak with a heavier toast can lift up that structure and accentuate it as well. So I really try and take each varietal to its own natural conclusion, respecting the terroir, and then the assemblage begins. So all the best barrels go into Harmonious always. But with that said, if I have, say, 9 barrels, a 3-ton batch of Petit Verdot, I only need 2 or 3 barrels for Harmonious, and I have 6 to play with. So the best of the 6 that aren't fitting into the Harmonious blend will go into the Petit Verdot single varietal blend. And the Petit Verdot I've made is 100% Petit Verdot. Absolutely 100%, because there's nothing.
There's no other little touch up here and there. It's 100%.
No, but in fact, I'm finding that when I do a pure varietal Cabernet Sauvignon, that some Cab Franc really works. In 2015, I was at 10%. In 2019, Special Reserve, which is in the Discover the Mermaid pack on Carl's Wine Cellar, that's 14% Cab Franc. So, I'm careful because at 15%, it's no longer single varietal. It's no longer single vineyard, according to the regulations laid down by the BC Wine Authority. So I'm respecting that. I'm going to call something, vineyard specific or terroir specific. It has to be at least 85% of that grape from that vineyard, from that terroir. So, but in the case of Petit Verdot, there's no blending. In the case of the Viognier, there's no blending. Those are 100% single vineyard wines.
Is it, I know that every grapes are very special in their unique way, but when for you have a very special affinity with Viognier. That's definitely, I start to know you a little bit more. Your love for Viognier. When we move into the red, do you have kind of the same soft spot for Petit Verdot when it's time for red, or it's more something that you find that is really unique spot in your portfolio more than the emotional connection with the grape?
Well, there's a lot of questions. Well, let's start at the top. How I came to do varietal Petit Verdot was a bit of an accident, because in 2010, when I started Siren's Call brand, the first vintage was made at Synchromesh, Al Dickinson and Family's winery. And when I was laying out the barrels for the first Harmonious, I think it's 12 or 14 barrels, 16, something like that, I had 3 barrels that just stood out and went, oh my God, those are fantastic barrels. I can't just blend those. I have to put them out. They have to have their own life. So I had to rethink my strategy at that point, and I had 1 barrel of Merlot, 1 barrel of Petit Verdot, and 1 barrel of Malbec, which gives 23 to 25 cases, that had such unique personalities that they had to go on their own. So they came out of the Harmonious blend and became single varietal brands for Siren's Call. And over the years, they've just grown to be, well, they were then and they are still significant and important parts of what we do, because they're somewhat unusual. Not everybody makes Petit Verdot and Malbec. Viognier is now more popular, but at the time, not many people were making Viognier. And I thought, as a new brand, the way to stand out is to make interesting wine. And if you make wine from Pinot Gris and Merlot, everybody's got that. So you better be damn good at those varietals to stand out in a very crowded field. I mean, you're making Merlot, and there's 100 other guys who've been doing it for 20 years. You know, they got a head start. But if you're making varietals that are not widely grown or made, then there's less people doing it. So you have more of an opportunity to make a quality statement with those grapes. So that's why I chose that path. A, because the wine spoke to me and it was good enough to be on its own. But B, that I saw, you know, as an entrepreneur, I thought, well, this is a good way to gain recognition for a new wine brand, is to make wines that are a bit unique and interesting, and not, you know, run of the mill, shall we say. Not that Pinot Gris run of the mill. I didn't mean it that way it sounds, but not as common. That's a better word. And in the same vein, I've made a couple of vintages of Gruner Veltliner, and really enjoyed that. But man, is that hard to sell? No one can say it. No one knows what it is. No one knows where it's from. So if you're too far off in left field, then, you know, no one's going to buy it. So having customers is as important as having good wine. So we have to find that balance. So by having Petit Verdot, we're just talking about that for a minute, by having that as a unique varietal that not many people make, I'm able to go to a trade tasting or go into a restaurant, pour a wine for a sommelier, or even talk to, you know, a potential consumer who wants to fill their cellar and say, I've got something interesting and unique that you may not have heard of before. So I'm going to take the time to explain it to you. So in all my tech sheets, I have the vineyard, where it's from, something about the vinification, some tasting notes, some points if it got any points, or critics notes, and some specs. So the personality of the wine and the technical basis are easy to see and understand, and it's not keeping it a mystery. It's there. It is. That's the vineyard. That's where it's from. That's who grew it. Here's what happened in the cellar, and I hope you like it. So I think that openness in what the intellectual property is behind the winemaking really appeals to consumer, because they can understand the farm to table element, they can understand the vinification element, they can understand the wood and what it did and where it's from. So that gives a lot of points of contact for consumers to intersect with the brand. A lot of things that can be interesting to different groups of people.
So before we touch base in the vessel, so how do you treat in each year the Petit Verdot? I want us to talk about the picking date, because one thing that I know about Petit Verdot, it's usually Petit Verdot is one of the last grape varietal to be taken off the vines, correct?
Always.
Year in and year out.
Well, it'll between that and Cab Sauv, yeah, for sure. But the terroir where it's grown is extra special, because the East Bench in Osoyoos, so I don't know if any of you know that area, but it's on the road that zigzags up over to the Kootenays. So you go up and over, or beside, shall we say, Anarchist Mountain, where there's an exceptional Merlot vineyard we all know. We'll talk about that another day. But the East Bench has this, it's very sandy soil, so there's good water drainage, so you can have, you know, thirsty vines, or quality induced by some water stress. I think that's the right term. But also it's very exceptionally well air drained, and it's in a desert. So you've got all those boxes to tick. Desert means less moisture, less botrytis, less bunch rot, all that kind of stuff, because it's a drier, hotter place. Soyuz, as you go further south, some of the hottest places in Canada, and we routinely get 37, 38 degrees in the summer. And there are bodies of water there. There's, the two lakes on either side of the vineyard, but the vineyard itself is not really lake influenced because it's up the side of the hill. And exceptional air drainage means you can have up to 195 days growing season, plus or minus, from bud break in May until picking. And, we've picked that vineyard as late as November the 3rd in a snowstorm, which isn't really that much fun, but sometimes you do what you got to do. But we always get ripening late into October in that vineyard. So even when, you look at the vineyards in the low parts of Oliver and Naramata, you get an early frost. Often we get an early frost, early middle October, before Thanksgiving. That'll fry the leaves in all the low-lying areas, and you'll just see brown, yellowy leaves. But then you go up to the east bench, you go up the hill, the side of the hill, up 800 feet from the valley bottom, and the leaves are still green, and they're still cooking. They're still making photosynthetic. They're still creating sugars. So, we picked some vineyards this year, October the 7th, October the 10th, around there, 23, 25 bricks. We did have good bricks early on, but then we picked that vineyard. I'm sure I stuck the hydrometer, and I couldn't believe it. 28 bricks. Oh my God.
What?
Yes, 28 bricks. Might have been
Holy
27 after we squeezed the grapes. But the first dip of the hydrometer was like, it wouldn't sink. It was so thick. It was like, that was a
Holy geez, like
exceptionally
blood.
ripe fruit this year. High bricks would mean higher alcohol. So, that means, some methods in the cellar are going to have to allow for that.
That's for
So that's the
sure.
east bench.
That's for sure. And well, we all know that this year we had that heat dome. So yes, like I think we've seen some across the valley some higher some higher bricks in many different aspects. So yeah, that's for sure. So now Petit Verdot, late ripening type of grape varietal, usually almost one of the last to be picked up. When it's time to ferment the Petit Verdot, is there a general consensus on what's the best way to ferment Petit Verdot, or you have your own technique? This is you use I don't know, French barrel, American barrel, but is it a how do you process the Petit Verdot yourself in the cellar?
Well, the question really goes back to the structure of the grape cluster. And Petit Verdot grapes have a thick skin. The bundles or the clusters, I'll call them fluffy, but they're not densely packed together. Like a Pinot Noir cluster, it's really dense, and there's no space between the grapes. So if you have any moisture, you can get bunch rot, botrytis, various, disease pressures on Pinot Noir, much more so than Petit Verdot. So thick skin, small berries, lots of space in the clusters means that you don't necessarily have to sort it very much. It's usually it's a pretty hardy grape. So when we bring it in the cellar, we can, just destem it. And because it's a smaller berry, the rollers on our destemmer, they go in and out like this. They're like rubber rollers that can be where you can change the distance. So we open our destemmer rollers up quite a bit. So a Malbec berry will get, well cracked, not crushed, but well cracked. But a Petit Verdot berry will just skate right through and barely get cracked. So what ends up happening due to the small diameter of the berry is the ferment is pretty much a whole berry ferment, much more so than a larger diameter grape like Malbec or even Merlot. So by nature of that, you have a lot of sugar trapped in the berries. So the fermentation might last longer. It might get stuck. You got to be careful because there's sugar trapped in the unpenetrated, non-disrupted skins of the berry. So when you press it, you can expect sometimes a bit more sugar, but for sure you're going to have a long ferment. Higher bricks means higher alcohol, so you're going to have stress on the yeast as the fermentation proceeds. So the yeast strain selection is quite important. You need a alcohol tolerant yeast, and you need one that's going to cook right to the end and give you a strong, consistent fermentation. So we have a particular yeast that I like that works really well in those conditions. And the batch size, If it's under 2 tons, we'll probably do it in a bin or a macro bin. If it's over 2 tons, we'll do it in a tank. So that's punch downs versus pump overs. Both work well, but I prefer pump overs in a tank with temperature control because we get a more consistent temperature profile. So that would be preferred method, would be a 3 to 5 ton batch in a short fat tank with pump overs and good
And
temperature control.
for you, when you use the pump over technique, what that pump over gives you over the punch down? What's the difference between both of this technique, just for our people who are listening who are not sure?
Well, I don't know if I can really answer that question. The only thing is, in a bin, temperature control is more challenging. You want to cool that bin, you got to put a blade heater in the grapes. You want to heat it up, you got to wrap it in a blanket. You can't really put a propane heater on a plastic vessel. But in a tank, we have a very precise temperature control via our chiller, which you can just set at whatever temperature you want. So I think the consistency can be better in a tank ferment, and the thermal mass can be higher. So we're putting that in plain English. You got a big ass batch, it's going to cook. It's going to get the heat that's going to give you the good extraction.
That makes sense. A lot of sense. Now, so let's talk 2017 vintage first and foremost. From what I'm hearing, or from what I'm talking with other winemakers, 2017 was a roller coaster. There was some heat spikes, there were some rains, there was some cold, there was a slow spring. So if you have to define 2017 growing season, do you have any qualify? Is there anything that stood in mind to you to come up with? Yes,
I know the answer. Thank God I have awesome growers on my team. Well, seriously, you have growers that can adapt to a challenging, set of climate conditions. You're going to get good fruit. Simple as that. And also the vineyard site plays a huge role. I mean, if you have good air drainage, you're not going to get cooked by an early frost. If you've got good cross ventilation and the right canopy management, then you're going to have, lower disease pressure. So it really boils down often to the shape of the vineyard, the actual geography, also the trellising methods, and the row spacing plays a role. I mean, if I remember correctly, the Beast Bench Vineyard is 7x3, 7-foot spacing between the rows and 3 feet between plants, which is quite dense. I think that's 19 to 100 roughly vines per acre. So I believe what that spacing brings is the right balance to the vineyard. That vineyard is incredibly productive, and the tons per acre are higher because the rows are closer together and there's more plants. But I think the density of the vineyard plays a role in regulating the relative growth of each plant, or the competitive pressures of having a denser vineyard means each plant is in balance. So a plant in balance means that the grapes have the right amount of nutrition and sun and light, and there's the right amount of material that's trying to ripen through the veins of the plant, or the trunk, so the material can flow up from the dirt and into the clusters. So a vineyard in balance is going to be more resilient against all kinds of environmental pressures.
That's for sure. So if we, I think, and 2018 was a colder vintage in general. And when we go to 2019 is a warmer vintage. So we have here in front of us 3 very different vintage. Mother Nature gave you a very uneven vintage on 17, colder vintage on 18, and warmer vintage on 19. So we have 3 very different expression of that Petit Verdot. Now, when I get to taste it, I definitely see the 19 is an absolute monster. It is big. It is muscular. It is super masculine, higher in alcohol. 18, it's brighter, it's fresher. There's more herbaceousness, herbaceous tone in there. And on the 17, I got some spice. I got some minerality as well. So they're very all very, very different in their flavor profile. Am I correct with that, or am I completely out of whack?
Well, no, there's no right and wrong. It's what you experience. I mean, in my view, those wines are fairly similar in their style and how they're made. And how they present and what situations you drink them in. And I think there's certainly nuances, but I'll tell you, it's way different than a Pinot Noir. So they're all varietally correct and big and chewy and robust. It's just a question of degrees. Like some are like over the top, some are just right. So maybe it's dark chocolate instead of milk chocolate, but it's still chocolate.
Yeah, you're right about that. You're right about that. When you make your Petit Verdot, what are you looking for specifically? Is there any like flavor that you like to extract every year? Some very like basic of the Petit Verdot for you are critical to extract and put in the bottle.
Well, I think the characteristics of Petit Verdot or that particular vineyard are, I would say, some chocolate, similar to a character you get from Merlot. And I think it might even be part of the terroir because I get that same chocolate note from Anarchist Mountain Merlot when I used to make that wine from that vineyard. And the other predominant characteristic is cassis, which is, I think it's black currant or blackberry, but cassis to me means a little bit more port-like. It's a more extracted form of that, a more I hate use the word oxidized, but it's a richer form of that fruit. So it's not just a simple fruit; it's the fruit that's being transformed into a beautiful liqueur. So that's what cassis means to me, because I enjoy the actual liqueur called cassis. It has bright fruit, great acidity, but a rich, intense, long dark fruit flavor. So dark fruit and chocolate, they really stand out. The acidity is always quite robust. We've seen in that vineyard, 9-10 grams of acid. That's grams per liter total acidity. And other vineyards, same year, same situation, same daylight amount of daylight would be more in the 7.5 gram per liter range. So this Petit Verdot seems to hold the acidity a little bit longer. And we definitely have to ripen it longer. We definitely are picking Petit Verdot 3 to 4 or 5 weeks after Pinot Noir. Like that's pretty much rule of thumb. I think this year wasn't quite like that. It was maybe 5 weeks between the first reds, which is usually Pinot Noir, and the last reds, which is usually Petit Verdot. And that gives us an interesting strategy in the winery because sometimes we can have two ferments through the same vessel. So we have an early red come in. We get 10, 12, 15 days on the skins, which I think we were 15 or 16 on this year's Pinot Noir. And then something else can go in that tank. So we have a later harvest Bordeaux varietal go in the same vessel. So that helps us, be efficient in use of vessels in the winery. And that's important. Does that answer your question?
It does. It does. Sorry. I was just revisiting the 2019 here. And there's also another like something consistent among the three that I got. It's a chewy tobacco.
Yes.
Okay. That's something that I get among the three of the wine. That chewy tobacco comes out pretty quick. And I love the spice. There is a cloves and cinnamon at the end. A little bit like Christmas spice.
Yeah.
Also who comes up at the end. Is the barrel help to extract the spice at the end, or is typically in the grapes?
Oh no, the barrel program, is critically important. And I think, where I found a sweet spot with Petit Verdot is a little bit of American oak, typically 2 out of the 9. Let's say it's a 9-barrel batch. It might be 1 or 2 American oak and one or two new French oak, and definitely some single pass. I think I'd have to go back and look at my records, but I had one batch of Petit Verdot where I had 3 or 4 single pass of those Seguin Moreau barrels. So some of the intensity of the barrel had softened after its second visit with wine, but man, it still gave this beautiful, spicy, meaty thing. And that savory, meaty character you were referring to, some wine people might call that cooked prunes or, something in that nature. There's a flavor on the Davis flavor wheel that describes that. But that kind of gamey, savory meatiness, I think, comes from the precise and unique bundle of tannins you get from the Petit Verdot grape. And because it's a thick skin, the ratio of skin to pulp is way different than just about any other grape. And there's other varietals that have a small berry, but none that have a small berry and a really thick skin. I think Cab Sauv is similar, but generally speaking, the skin is thicker on a Petit Verdot and you get a more intense purple than you do in a caps off. So the skin contact's important. And you want to find a barrel that lifts that up. So some nice spicy medium toast is going to be beautiful to lift up that spicy immediate character. A little bit of toast, like that's a varietal you can go, with some medium plus heavier toast wood in some part of the program. That's going to work well, I think, and it lifts the chocolate into a dark chocolate. It accentuates that character. And there's also another flavor group in Petit Verdot. I would call it kind of violet floral. I don't know what the
Yeah,
right
absolutely.
descriptors are, but I
Yeah.
think, I listened to Rob's presentation yesterday on Syndicate, and he was talking about, I think, up to 20% of the Petit Verdot and his blends bringing that aspect. So that, I think, comes somewhat from the fermentation. Precursors are in the skins that are grown, they occur in the vineyard, and we just transform them with the right yeast and the right fermentation dynamics into, capturing those beautiful aromas. So that's, I think, a big part of the show for Petit Verdot is that violet, chrysanthemum, floral, lilac. Can't quite put my finger on it, but it's definitely part of the magic and the real signature for that grape.
Yeah, no, definitely. And also that smoked meat that I refer, we talked about it earlier. To me, like I get this, it's smoked meat that I get in there. So really, so basically really complex. There's some floral, some herbaceousness. There's that torrefaction sense of dark chocolate, espresso coffee. So all of these type of flavors and the spice at the end. So it's dense, it's concentrated, it's compact. So it's a very unique type of grape. So when you, as a winemaker, make that type of wine, do you have an expectation of what people brings on the dinner table? I know it's very up to everyone. You can drink your Petit Verdot with a piece of fish if you feel like it, because it's all about personal taste. But what would be the classic dish that you would like to see with your Petit Verdot on the table?
Well, I sure as hell wouldn't serve Petit Verdot with sole, but maybe a smoked black Alaska cod. I don't know, but that's a good question because I've done quite a few winemakers dinners, and I have a kind of a theme that I will bring to the discussions with the chef and a winemaker's dinner, which is to find the wines that really work well with certain foods. So I found that in a winemaker's dinner that Petit Verdot is a great dessert wine because it's got the higher alcohol. It can be some sweetness and mouthfeel from the alcohol, and it stands up well to someone's palate who's maybe saturated from all the beautiful things they've just eaten and drank. And it goes particularly well with dark chocolate, like a chocolate truffle, a chocolate ganache cake, a chocolate cheesecake, chocolate fondue, anything dark chocolate, particularly the little bit more bitter Belgian type chocolates, not as much sweet, like an American chocolate would be sweeter typically. Those pairings are beautiful. But I think also another beautiful pairing would be the whole group of flavors that would come from dishes like coq au vin, bouillabaisse, and cassoulet, which is a dish they make in France with sausages and fennel sausage and beans and slow cooked, concentrated, maybe some sous vide meats, something smoked, or those intense flavors. The Petit Verdot is going to provide a fantastic backbone of acid and fruit, these bigger, robust flavors, and the acidity is necessary when you're eating, a fattier dish, a pork belly or rack of lamb or those kind of things. So the good acid background of Petit Verdot is going to, complement those dishes well. So those two flavor groups.
Mark,
Beautiful cooked food from France and chocolate.
how about this? A slow smoked brisket. Like
Yeah.
that fatty piece of meat. It was been like for a long time, like smoked. And I know I just have that in my mind, like with a nice rubs of spice around it, and like nice
Yeah.
fatty brisket that feels like it
That's
would
working
be.
for me.
I just feel it's gonna cut through that right away. Anyhow, so that's for the food pairing part of it. Uh, in terms of perfect vintage, in terms of, okay, I know that like Mother Nature is the boss out there, but if you have to put on paper, what would be um, your favorite vintage description for a Petit Verdot? What's the ideal for you and the way you like to have it back at the cellar?
I don't. You have to explain that question to me again. I don't fully understand it. Do you mean which vintage do I remember the best, or what's the best type of
Oh,
growing
but
conditions?
it's pretty much which vintage you remember the best because it's pretty much how you like what Mother Nature gives you the most, or the perfect sequence of weather for you to bring the Petit Verdot in the top notch condition.
Yeah. Well, the two vintages I remember the most are 2010, because it's the first time I made it. I went, oh my God, this is special. This is something really unique that I have to, nourish. I have to build this into a brand, not just a proportion of the blend. So the first time I really experienced it was good, profound. And 2015 was an exceptional vintage. We had, remember that year clearly because we had two 5-ton batches in the winery. We filled our big tanks, and we had, 3-foot cap. We think of 3 feet of skins floating on 6 feet of wine, maybe the plus or minus those dimensions, but it was a big batch, big ass hose, 3-inch hose, standing up a ladder 10 feet in the air, pumping it over. Like you're feeling like you gone to war and you got a big batch and you better be on top of your game to figure this out and make a good bottle of wine out of it. And it turned out stellar. I mean, the 2015, I think that I think it got a medal. I'd have to go back and look, but I think that was the year I was almost won my second lieutenant governor award because we were in the final cut. We didn't make it into the final 13 or 14 wines, but we did get one for Syrah a few years before that. So that was almost number two, which would have means it's not an accident. So that's pretty good to be recognized that way. But most importantly, customers really enjoyed that vintage. We had people that were fanatical about it and ordered it by the case and keep asking for it. And I do have a few bottles tucked away in my cellar. So anyone that comes for a visit and a sleepover, you can go find it in the cellar with the other 1,000+ bottles down there. And yeah, so that's 15 was a good year for sure. No smoke pressure, just right, hot, long, sunny. So if I want the perfect condition for Petit Verdot, I actually like it a little cooler because if it's a hot, hot year, it's going to rush to a high Brix before the phenolic ripeness really comes into play. So I think what made 2016, which we aren't talking about today, but 2016 exceptional was that it was cooler and we had the flavor development more in parallel with the photosynthesis, or putting that in a different way, the phenolics in the sticks and the stems and sticks and seeds of the grapes were allowed to develop, not behind or chasing the Brix, but beside. So when you have a vintage that's a little cooler and you get 26 Brix third week of October, maybe 25, but brown seeds and brown sticks, that's a really good scenario for Petit Verdot. When you got a hot year and the Brix is climbing fast before the seeds and stems catch up, that makes it a little trickier to make a wine that's smooth and elegant. It'll be robust and powerful, but you got to tame it a bit in the cellar. You might need to age it longer, or be more careful what barrels you put, or blend something into it, or God knows what, or shorten up the skin contact. There's many outcomes. So I like the little bit cooler, slower ripening years overall for just about any grape.
Well, I have the feeling with the 19 and the 18, it's such a clear-cut comparison between the two wines. I feel like the 19 really needs to sit down for a few years, give it some time to tame down a little bit. It's extremely in your face, but the potential of that wine,
Oh, it's a
this wine,
monster.
this wine can last for 15 years, and I won't even be worried about 15 years of aging with that wine. And I would like to forget about this one a little bit. The 18 to me, will start to shine in a couple years. Like I see the freshness in that wine, and the 17 is just starting to offer, like to showcase his real attribute right now. Definitely the 17 shows beautifully right now,
Oh,
and
thank
the
you.
18 will follow, not far. Not far off, but the 19, I want to forget about it. But this 19 has a boatload of potential. That is for
Yeah,
sure.
thank you.
That's
Well,
for
that
sure.
brings an interesting point, and how I built these packs specifically for Carl Seller, is the fact that these wines, the newer vintages, aren't available like anywhere. I don't sell them. I just let them sleep. I usually want 1 to 2 years of age on my big reds before I release them. I'm trying to make enough wine that I'm able to do that. I don't want to, let something out early. Um, So when someone's buying these packs, I would say that 19, they should be looking for maybe drink one pack just for fun, but then the second pack, lay it down so you can really see the trajectory of the wines, because the 17s, I wouldn't say it's peaking, but it's in a really good place. The 18's drinking well, and 19, I think, yeah, a couple more years sleep, it's going to be good. But I also will point out they're all under non-breathing screw caps. So the aging environment is going to be much more controlled versus a cork. I mean, cork to me is a wild card. You never know what you're going to get. You buy a really good cork, as we do for some of our wines, Harmonious and Syrah and Cab Sauv are under cork. We buy the best corks we can get. Pretty much, they're almost 70 cents US each. But under a screw cap, it's more reductive environment. You're not going to get wines going bad in the cellar. So you have a screw cap wine that's a big monster, you can lay that to sleep. Without beyond a shadow of a doubt that in 10 years you're going to go there, you're not going to get a cork wine. Now in my cellar, I've got quite a few wines from 2005, 2008, 2009. They're corked, and these are from very, one producer who has just got some award for the best small winery in Canada. All the wines I have from that year are corked, and that's really sad. So I'm trying to drink up those vintages quick before they go bad. But with a screw cap, you can sleep at night.
And is there a bigger disappointment that you are expecting, like you're excited for a bottle, and you know that night you had it in your mind, and you put it up, and like, duh, this is a big deal. Like, it is really disappointing, and I'm with you. Now I like the way they're showing the difference. They're showing similarity in certain aspects, but I like how they are differently ready to go. And the 17, to me, like we just mentioned, it's maybe not priming, but it's in a beautiful place right now. A 92 plus point, definitely for me on the 17. The 19, I can't give him just one score. It's going to have to be a bracket score here, because there's too much coming like further down the road. But if it goes like way I'm expecting, this guy, there's a potential of a 93 points to me. Like, it's a 91 to 93 bracket, because there's a lot going on in that 2019 vintage. There is a lot. And in terms of the 18, I just love the freshness. I love the bright acidity, but I like also the spice. So in the meantime, that they're very different, they're similar, but they're different. I really enjoy the 18 right now as well. So these wines are well made. These wines are great. And it makes it for such an interesting evening of degustation, because if you want to pop the 3 out when you have guests over, you can spend hours just discussing one great varietal and just going back and forth with what Mother Nature gave you in a very specific vintage. It is so much fun. Mark, thanks for doing that. Thanks for putting these packs together for us. Because, like I said, same thing with the Viognier, right? Viognier, we have 18, 19, and 20. Petit Verdot, it's coming with the Petit Verdot packs with 3 vintages of Viognier, 3 vintages of Petit Verdot. And it's so much fun. And one thing we need to mention about the PV, it's the price point. Like, we haven't talked about the value proposition and all that, but when we're talking single varietal Petit Verdot, we usually expect a $45, $50 bottles. Not with you, Mark. So these wines are well priced, and that makes it extremely interesting for what we can how much fun we can have with these 3 wines. That's for sure.
Thank you.
So Sunday night now, 5:00 your time, our time, 8:00 Eastern time. So there's still plenty of time in front of us. I think I can smell Mira have something cooking on the other side. I think we're going to enjoy some Petit Verdot. Awesome. Finalizing tasting notes, posting our tasting notes tomorrow for everyone. We're going to have a blog post coming up in the next couple of days, Mark. So we're full on spotlight on Mark Simpson and Siren Skull in Karl's Cellar. If you have any question, you can head out on karlcellars.com to see the 2 packs that Mark's put together. And most of the wines and the Siren's Call offer are not available anywhere. Discover the Mermaid and the Vertical Pack. So, Mark, thanks for doing that. I really appreciate your time. Like, once again, it was a blast chatting with you.
Cool. Well, thanks for doing your good work to promote these wines and all our colleagues out there. So it's appreciated.
Oh, we just enjoy working with the Mermaid and working with you. And I guess that there's you were like center stage in the Julian Spark article about the 2021 vintage, and I would like to sit down with you. Maybe we can do that live and chat specifically about the 2021 wines who are coming our way, who are now in the winemaking facility, because I'm really curious of what we have coming up about 2021. So maybe we can schedule a little something together so we can chat 2021.
Yeah, we can have some fun wines to taste. It's a nice way to see the potential because the character of the vintage is already showing its hand. So I think people will say that 2021 was interesting and challenging and had some great wines came out of that year. And there's going to be some challenges too.
I heard about a very promising rosés for the 2021 vintage. That's what I heard.
We had a lot of fun with that.
Through the grapevines, I've heard about a very spectacular rosé coming our way.
Good, thank you. Okay, well, you'll get to taste it. It's not a secret. We just talk. We'll get there. We'll unravel that one.
Oh, we will. Thank you, Mark. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday. I greatly appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody watching tonight. Appreciate you joining in, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Thank you. Canadian wine lovers, Carl's Wine Club members, thank you all for tuning in across the country, from Halifax to Victoria, en français, en anglais. Un gros merci à tous nos amateurs de vin francophones qui supportent nos producteurs canadiens. Encore une fois, là, je viens d'avoir l'écran qui vient de grossir sur moi. Mes dents sont purple, mes dents sont mauves. Le Petit Verdot, qui est un raisin qui est très, très, qui tâche, comme on dirait en français. Donc, oui, un gros merci à tout le monde en français. Thank you very much, everyone in English. I'm just showing my teeth. It's becoming purple. That's the Petit Verdot effect. So, thanks, everyone. We're going to be back tomorrow. Tomorrow on Monday, Spotlight is going to be on Jean-Pierre Collat, winemaker at 13th Street Winery out of the 20 Mile Bench in Niagara. So Jean-Pierre, originally from Chablis, who's been working in Niagara for now over 10 years, will be with us. We'll talk about sparkling wine and his première cuvée 2014. And we're also going to look at a Cabernet Franc. So we're going to chat 13th Street wine tomorrow for our fourth night on Carl's Cellar Spotlight. So everyone, enjoy the rest of your Sunday. We'll chat with you tomorrow. Thank you.